Thank you so much. It's great to be here again. I've really tried to pull it together during the past month. So, um, way, way, way long time ago in the 70s, I was a student at the University of Massachusetts trying to figure out what to do with my life. And I read that if you can write a letter home, you could be a journalist. And of course, I wrote letters home, as everyone has been saying. Everyone wrote letters back then. So the University of Massachusetts hosted a very important speech by one of its most famous professors, Stephen Oates. He was an eminent historian of Abraham Lincoln and Nat Turner and Martin Luther King. And he gave this beautiful speech about leadership in divisive times and racial justice. And I was thrilled. And I went back to my room and I got out something called a typewriter. Now, this was an amazing machine then because this was a special gift that I got as a going away to college present. It was electric. So you just had to touch the keys and the little metal things would fly up and print and smash onto the ink filled ribbon and print a letter right onto the paper. It was really amazing. It was like a computer and a printer all in one. And so I started at the beginning of this great speech and I wrote my story through to the end of the great speech. And I was very proud of myself. And I went down to the newspaper office. And that night, the duty editor was a young man named Paul Baskin. And to this day, I am so moved to think of how sweet he was, because he would have been within his rights to take one look at my papers and say, "You are an idiot who knows nothing about journalism." But instead, he said, "Okay, now what was the point of the speech, Becky?" And I said, and I thought of something, and we wrote that at the beginning of the story, the way a newspaper article is supposed to be written. And then he got out another typewriter and a big long piece of paper and scissors and glue. And for hours, we wrote new parts of the story and we cut and pasted. And at the end, we had this big long piece of paper and there was glue and there was paper. And I remember picking it up and thinking it must weigh like 2 or 3 pounds and taking it to typesetting. And the next morning, everywhere I went on campus, there was the newspaper with my story on it, printed in like 10,000 copies. I was hooked. So I went to Brownsville and worked at the newspaper there and won awards. And then I got a living wage job at the Austin American-Statesman. And I decided to have children. And I still loved shining the light on injustice. And I always remember my journalism professors at the University of Massachusetts said the job of the newspaper is to afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted. And I loved doing that, but there was starting to be a conflict in my mind between my job and these wonderful little boys. So, but I kept going, and I was assigned this amazing story about an emergency room doctor. Shout out to all the doctors and the nurses and the janitors and the cooks who are keeping our hospitals going during this crisis. But this particular doctor had been riding his bicycle when he was hit by a car and really badly injured. And it was an amazing story about, the positions being flipped, and he was in the ER really badly hurt, but they put him back together and he was able to get back to work. And as I was writing this, I realized that I loved it, but that I was ready to take a break. I figured that these kids were only going to be little kids for a short amount of time, and I thought newspapers would go on. Little did I know that the internet was coming for them. So I resigned my job, and I was sitting at the kitchen table reading the newspaper, and I saw this letter to the editor, and it said, "Congratulations to Rebecca Thatcher, because it's clear that her career has really taken off." And I thought, how little they know, how right they are. So I did quit working at newspapers, but I never quit newspapers, and none of us should. Our society needs newspapers. The Washington Post slogan, democracy dies in the darkness, is really true. And today you can get a printed newspaper and the ink won't come off in your hands like it did back in the 70s. And then you can use that paper newspaper to wash your windows or clean up after the animals or prevent weeds from growing in your garden, or you can read the newspaper on the internet. Either way, it's really important for our democracy to support a free press. Thank you so much.